Ark the Lad, Twilight of the Spirits is the fourth mainline title, but it comes with a lot of firsts. In addition to being both the first PS2 entry as well as the first Ark game in full 3D, it's also no longer developed by Ark Studio. Instead, Cattle Call have heeded the call. A new team meant a new direction, with Twilight almost completely removed from the games of old, taking place 1,000 years after the third title and featuring a handful of references which are entirely unimportant to the core events. This is an Ark game in spirit only, which is fitting as the only through line is the influence of the spirits. We open with a mysterious girl running from what looks like the Silver Noah, then hard cut to a quaint town with a balding warrior getting dropped by a JRPG protagonist. This is our new fella Karg, and as you can tell from his beautiful boyish face, he's perfect. Following on from Ark 3, this guy's another Alec type, and it's revealed that he's the crown prince of a dissolved kingdom and looked up to by everyone in town as the big strong boy. Then, moments into the first chapter, a spirit appears to confirm that he is in fact the Chosen One. But wait, there's more! He's also the bastard child of a human and a Deimos, two distinct species or races or whatever which can interbreed but never do because they hate one another, except for in this instance. Deimos are humanoid beasts evolved from monsters, and the two sects live in segregated societies locked in a perpetual war over a resource called Spirit Stones, which fuel both Deimos power and human technology. So Karg's a little bit special, but it's a secret. Shh, don't tell anyone. What isn't is that he's a manlet, so it kind of invalidates all the boons. Now, what sets Twilight apart from Ark 3 specifically is that the game's good and has an actual story. Karg's first major showing is being left in town as a band of taller men march off to protect a local spirit stone mine from Deimos, but being the protagonist, he sneaks off to assist. Arriving to a human massacre, our hero and his goblin companion triumphantly lead the boys to victory with the power of anime. On the trek back, Ark's childhood friend spots her balding father, the leader of the guard corps, in a skirm with some furries as a female and her child are seen fleeing before falling to their injuries. The blue daddy wolf, realizing he's outnumbered, rushes back to Anthrocon, then the old fella takes a knee and dies himself, which is our first exposure to the realities of the tribal hatred and how it manifests in a pointless war with unnecessary casualties. It sets the tone for the rest of the game, hammering home the divide between races and gives legitimate motivation to hate Deimos, if not for the death and disruption caused, at the very least, because spirit stones are expensive and I don't need these fuckers driving up the price. They say every story has two sides, and Twilight is no exception, as Karg, this perfect, beloved, outwardly human boy, has a twin brother, who is anything but. In fact, everyone hates this guy, he hates himself, and instead of being a crowned prince, he's a shackled slave. He also happens to be the second protagonist of our split narrative. Dark, with a C, looks significantly more like a Deimos than his brother, with a darker complexion, nappy-ass hair, sporadic scales, claws and wings, though he is still somewhat human in appearance. Due to this, he's hated by everyone, as each respective tribe reflect whatever they want to hate onto the poor lad. Deimos see a human, humans see a Deimos, and what makes Dark's campaign special is that it's not a direct parallel to Karg's. Where the more palatable of the brothers' stories revolves around how much humans love each other and how good they are, Dark's story revolves around how horrible Deimos are. It invites you to hate them on the other side of the aisle, which is a much more interesting approach than doing a clean perspective flip, where everyone's actually equal and any perceived flaws are an issue of optics. At every major point in his opening run, Dark is kicked around by someone with a stronger resolve. It begins with our slave boy running errands for his adoptive frogmaster before crossing paths with Delma and her older brother and leader of the Orcon, Denzimo. Delma approaches Dark whimsically at first, bullying the winged freak, with Denzimo almost reflexively resorting to violence at the mere sight of the humanoid fella, both fronting with hyper-aggressive posturing. This kind of hostile impulse is universal across the many Deimos you meet, and it's even reflected in the map design. Where humans live in clean, orderly towns and cities, Deimos either live in primitive natural structures or the destroyed remnants of former human civilization. Okoth being a great example of this, with the citizenry occupying hollowed-out trains in the ruins of what was once a modern subway system. Whether this was from a former, highly advanced civilization or a fairly recent band of humans that were run out by the Deimos is up in the air. While there are technologically advanced cities, we don't see that kind of modern design anywhere else, but the natural elements haven't fully consumed the mechanical, making it appear somewhat recent. But this soft world building doesn't really matter, because it's a character-driven narrative, and Delma takes an interest in our boy Dark. She develops a soft spot for him due to his caring human elements, where he offers her a ride through the skies and confides in her about his past, definitively proving that women are women. even if they look a little burnt on the outside. After being attacked by a Drakir, the same type of Deimos we saw in Karg's chapter, Dark returns home where Big Frog demands he find a mythical creature she can sell for drug money. These rodents are widely sought by Deimos for their power-bestowing properties, and Dark manages to wrangle one, but doesn't have the balls to hand over a living creature. To aid in his character building, he constructs a nest and protects his new little buddy and its eggs in the same dilapidated ruins where his father's grave's maintained. This shows a secretive, sentimental side, confirming that his human blood runs deep. It also establishes that despite his pain and suffering, Dark has a sanctuary, a safe place free from his life where everything he cares about is enshrined and protected. During another demon date, he and Delma are ambushed by humans, and after dispatching them, try the humans' weapons on for size. Upon realizing that he'd be relying on constructs of the enemy, and disgusted at the thought, they're quickly discarded, also confirming that despite Dark's humanity, he still sees himself as a Deimos above all. The arrogance in his uncertainty cements how he's unable to accept what he is due to everyone else feeling the same way. He doesn't belong anywhere, and he knows it. The dispatched humans were mercenaries who strayed too far from their caravan and attacked the Deimos reflexively, but the Drakir that attacked our Darky boy were there for a specific purpose. They wanted his Wind Stone. The Orcon leader, Denzimo, isn't too fond of these Mortal Kombat looking motherfuckers prowling around his territory. Dark and Delma link up with him to secure the borders and end up in a desert where they find Frog Bitch hanging from a tree. Strung up by the Drakir and attempting to free her, the trio are ambushed by our winged foes and completely overpowered. Dark has information they need and they'll stop at nothing to get it, which sees the poor half-caste wings ripped clean from his body as he struggles to maintain his tight-lipped composure. Delma, sick of seeing her new BFF in pain, spills the beans on the Windstone's location, despite Dark's pleas, and after they've ripped his wings clean off his fucking body, our hero falls unconscious from the pain, and the rest of the party are knocked out as well. Awakening to an empty battlefield, the only remaining body is Delma's, who's still out cold. Dark heads to the church to catch up with his winged adversaries, only to find Denzimo, Sneedo, and the Drakir are all in cahoots together. Warthilda agrees to sell Dark to the enemy, the Drakir have located the Windstone, and Denzimo's just eaten Dark's little animal family, so everyone got what they wanted. You know, except for Dark, who was betrayed by every single person who ever showed him anything close to kindness. As you'd assume, his personal sanctuary being invaded breaks something in our confused protagonist, and he realizes that to live out his father's dying wish of saving the Deimos, he first has to save them from themselves. Denzimo gives him a little shove right into the human armor that was scoffed at only a few scenes ago. He accepts that as neither human nor Deimos, his pride is little more than vanity and dons the weapons which grant him the physical and mental strength to methodically cut down each and every demon who fucked with him. What follows is a cascade of cathartic combat wherein our hero brutally slaughters everyone. After dispatching the fiends, Delma rocks up to ask if the Drakir killed her brother, to which Dark responds,
"No. I did."
The shred of humanity Delma saw in our half-caste fella was completely lost as he pledges to lead the Deimos to victory over the humans by any means necessary. Well, that certainly shits all over Karg's first chapter, and speaking of, this is where we flip back to the beautiful anime boy. It's just getting good too. The blue balling isn't so bad, after all, absence makes the heart grow fonder. As unbalanced as these two heroes are in their narrative moments, in that the dark stories are always significantly more interesting, it wouldn't hit the same highs without the juxtaposition of the human chapters. Betrayal and revenge stories are hard to fuck up as you get that satisfaction of seeing some wicked beings get what's coming to them in a relatively short period of time. You don't need to assess the moral questions because they're removed and all you're left with is the mindless, penalty-free bloodlust. It's very gratifying. However, the duality of human and Deimos strengthen the overall narrative by building the world and characters in believable ways, and I don't think Dark's circumstances would be as bleak and depressing if we didn't see Karg's perfect anime life beforehand. While his first chapter ended in tragedy, he still has a support network of friends who adore him and lives in a relatively safe, secure environment with like-minded people of his own creed. Whereas Dark's chapter may have ended in triumph, but despite all he did to build friends and allies along his journey, he ultimately ended up alone again, though liberated and enlightened. And that's worth at least, 2 friends. After each opening chapter, which were both solid for their own reasons, the subsequent ones failed to hit the same highs. It seems to me that they front-loaded such an engaging, well-paced opening that it was simply impossible to keep that momentum. But that's okay, not every chapter can be gold, because if it all sparkled, the shine would be lost in the glimmer. Whatever the case, it's a hell of a way to make me interested in the characters I'll be spending the next 30 hours with. While we never fully capture that raw angst of the revenge porn opening, there are some powerful themes sprinkled throughout the subsequent chapters. I'm not going to give them the same level of recount as I did the first two. I think that'd be incredibly boring. You could just go play the game, but we're far from done here. And speaking of, if you want to play the game on your own, now's probably a good time to stop watching, because, about to blow this fucker up. Chugging along the narrative tracks, each character will ultimately end up with 4 companions, serving as direct parallels to one another. We're quite familiar with Dark and Karg already, so let's go over their chums. Paulette is Karg's childhood friend, more of a sister figure at first due to Karg's absent father and, her available one becoming a role model. Maru is a forest goblin who steals from people to survive, but then it turns out he's a crowned prince of a kingdom that isn't dissolved, and he's also got psychic powers. He joins Karg after a failed pickpocketing attempt and getting smoked in combat. Gans is a former mercenary attempting to live a secluded, self-sufficient life. He's seen his fair share of war and wishes to exist as far away from it as possible, but when the party's in need of an airship mechanic, he becomes entangled in the overall narrative and sticks by Karg. And finally, Tatiana is a former antagonist and head of scientific research for a hostile enemy army and major antagonist of the game. Once she's fulfilled her usefulness, she's left to die, where upon being saved by the heroes, she joins them as a debt of gratitude. Dark's companions aren't as complex. The reason they follow him is because they know he could, and probably would, kill them. Volk is a towering blue beast and appears in Orkoth to challenge the strongest Deimos in a fit of pure rage after his family was lost to Paulette's father. The Dark is much stronger, however, so Volk becomes beta to Dark's alpha, never straying. After the death of her brother at Dark's hands, Delma swears revenge upon our half-caste hero and is imprisoned. Dark, realizing he'll need powerful allies to achieve anything, forces Delma to accompany him. Camellia is a crusty old flower demon who was captured and experimented on by Tatiana of the human tribe, only to be freed by Dark, and follows him out of pure cowardice. Everyone hates her because of this, but she's hedging the winning bet, so to speak. The final character is what brings the Deimos party together and creates a far more complex dynamic than just Dark strong, me follow. Bebedora is a little puppet demon, a henchman of the Great One, and while not technically a Deimos, she blends in quite well. Her primary ability is that she can read minds and emotions, which makes for a great addition to a bunch of impulsive, violent humanoids with suppressed fifis. The Deimos party interactions are bolstered by their mutual dislike of one another. Dark is outwardly cautious, yet overly trusting of his inner circle. Volk and Delma are constantly at each other's throats. Volk, being wholly loyal, isn't too fond of Delma's attempted mutiny, and, she just doesn't really like anyone. Camellia is a pathetic, weak coward and looked down upon by the party for her repeated attempted betrayals. Bebedora's ability to gauge emotions is despised by everyone, as they have to keep the tough exterior, so they hate her as much as they hate being honest about their feelings. Which is a lot. The human interfacing doesn't have the same kick to it, as it's based on the standard tropes of friendship and happy good times solving mysteries with the gang. It's vapid, it's hollow, but collective hatred and mistrust is a perspective not often seen, particularly in JRPGs, so the Deimos gang is always a delight to see interact. While the parties have their own vibe, every time they meet it boils down to tribal warfare, which undermines how the two groups serve as direct parallels to one another. Dark and Karg are two sides of the same coin, and their ideologies are in direct opposition. The Deimos want the human gone, and vice versa. However, the allies go a little deeper. Paulette and Volk are the second in command to the protagonists, and as loyal as a beaten dog, but they have history where Paulette's father killed Volk's family while dying at Volk's hand. Gans had a buddy in the military who was slain by a Deimos, and that guy just so happens to be the human who dropped the claw donned by Delma. Their personalities are also in direct opposition, where Gans is a humbled, forgiving man, Delma wants to fight everything and has no capacity for forgiveness. Camellia, being the selfish coward, is a great contrast character for Tatiana, a confident, accomplished woman who strove to work for the best of the collective in her former position. It just so happens that Camellia is a vain, smoking hot plant, and Tatiana experimented on her, making her look old and withered, so there's some bad blood. Where the sassy scientist approaches even death with confident assurance that it's for the greater good, the plant I want to bury my dick in fears and actively avoids any strife. Maru and Bebedora are unique in that they're the common link between parties. The two psychic characters who don't distrust or hate one another. There's even a chapter where they team up as a buddy-buddy duo, as Bebedora kinda passes for human. There was clearly a lot planned for this level of theming, but the parties only have two major interactions before they become best friends, with neither resulting in anything of note, narratively or otherwise. To add to how character-centric Twilight of the Spirits is, certain fellas go through physical changes to represent new states of resolve. Paulette dons her father's pauldron, which is also where her name derives from, as another type of shoulder accessory is an epaulette. Very sneaky, cattle call. How do you know that? You're Japanese, you don't speak French or English. In fact, neither do I.
くそ、どうでもいい。
As Dark accepts his human armor, his character model changes, as does Delma once she pilfers her claw. Tatiana's portrait changes as she joins her former enemy, Camellia becomes re-euthanized, which doesn't represent anything other than me wanting to pollinize a flower, and finally, Karg has a little demon freak out where he sprouts wings and he starts listening to Linkin Park. Also, he rips them off by hand, very thematic. Now that the wings are ripped off like bandages, the grand narrative can begin, and we're introduced to two stinky men who mirror our protagonist to a scary degree. Karg's parallel is the leader of the Dillsweld army, whose methods to acquire the Great Spirit Stones are invasive and careless. Your boy Dillsweld put pressure on Karg in his hometown after a mysterious girl named Lilia arrives, as they desperately need her for whatever reason. Karg is sent to Cathena, effectively a central hub for dealing with worldly affairs, and gets caught up in red tape and bureaucratic squabbling as his house is bombed off the face of the planet. This prompts him to seek a renegade faction who are directly pushing back against Dillsweld's evil plans, which is where he finds Samson. While never joining the party full-time, Samson is one of the most important characters. It seems like every time Karg and company are in hot water, he's always there to bail them out. He's like a father figure, which is great, because, our party could use a replacement. Samson is the captain of a small faction of bandits and has made it his life's work to fuck with the Dillsweld army. And that's it. He has no alliances to anyone or anything unless it's sabotaging the oppressive army's operations. So he says. The leader of this regime, Darkham, leveled the bandits' town, which caused him to flee with his wife and child. Hiding them somewhere safe, he set off to push back against the hostile forces, as his wife fell fatally ill and passed, leaving his child alone. Samson made some mistakes, and he seems to recognize that in his own overly confident way, but that fuels his hatred of his enemy further. He's ostensibly lost everything at this point, and is blinded by his pursuit of revenge, so were he to stop, he'd have nothing to return to. Messing with Dillsweld's all that remains, and while that does bring a strong ally, it's also kinda depressing. Particularly when it's revealed that the special girl who Dillsweld flattened Karg's town to capture is Samson's daughter. This prompts him to confront Darkham, only to be completely overwhelmed and lose his life in the process. Karg is present for both the death of Samson as well as that of Paulette's father at the beginning of the game, both of which are major turning points for our hero. Dark has his own parental issues, with Greedo dying at the beginning of his narrative and meeting his biological mother moments before she's shot dead. Both boys are witness to two parental figures' deaths, but it prompts a bit of introspection about their flaws. Dark projects a tough exterior, so naturally his losses come from a maternal place, even if Greedo was, not the most maternal. One could see his defeat of Greedo being a rejection of motherly affection, where his real mother, giving the whole, "Bro, I love you even if you can't slam dunk" speech, gave him the kind of love that he never felt. An attempted softening of the edge that backfired, no pun intended, once he physically saw that softer side die. Karg's moments function much the same, with the initial loss of his commander, who was like a father figure in a way, giving instructions and shaping his development. The loss of Samson was far more devastating, however, because I liked him more and he would have fucked way harder. I joke about Karg not having a father figure, but Samson is always the bridge to the logic of a parent, keeping our anime protag on the straight and narrow. Given that half the cast are in their teens and lacking that elderly wisdom, it makes sense to position this character in a guardian role. After Karg's demonic freakout and realization that he's half Deimos, our Sky Pirate daddy levels with him about why parents keep secrets from their children. He effectively tells Karg to stop being a spoiled brat and to trust that his mother made the correct decision regarding this biological reality. However, Samson's wisdom is a little two-faced and likely more a way of justifying his own mistakes regarding his daughter Lilia, who is also special. Lilia not only holds the Lightstone, one of the spirit power baubles everyone's after, but is also the vessel for the spirits, or some bullshit. Her existence is a huge deal, but the game uses her as a loose means of connecting the protagonists, and then sidelines her, so let's do the same. The Dillsweld army aren't just a one-dimensional bad guy, as once Karg confronts Darkham, it's revealed that as a boy, his town was on the verge of a huge war with the Deimos, and he was sent as a messenger to Cathena to seek aid. Trapped behind the red tape and all too familiar bureaucratic bullshit, much time was wasted, and he returned to find his home in ruins with every citizen dead. This pushed Darkham to subvert the disgusting latency of the world, assembling the strongest military force to seek the 5 Spirit Stones and use their collective power to genocide the Deimos, creating an everlasting peace so that his past may never be repeated again. Also, he creates a fake Windstone and nukes Cathena for good measure, which is kinda based. This is all revealed after Karg has bested Darkham in battle, which of course is a huge shock as Dillsweld were the enemy, but now their values align with the heroes. The two wish for the Deimos to be eradicated so that humanity may prosper without fear. Where Darkham attempted this by any means necessary, harming his own kind in the process, Karg took a slightly more manual approach. In his final moments, Darkham begs Karg to use the tools assembled to finally put an end to the Deimos menace. Our human hero now has a weapon of mass destruction in his hands, which challenges his convictions about whether he actually wants the Deimos removed, but he's stopped as the Deimos party arrive for a cheeky confrontation. Before that, however, let's check in on what Dark's been up to. Dill's World have a science and tech division that performs experiments on living Deimos in attempts to create the ultimate being, one which they can control. Despite a bunch of early failures, they eventually get close enough with the hybrid Deimos Droguza. He first appears when stealing the Water Spirit Stone from Dark's party, and the two have a little scuffle, with Dark coming out on tops in terms of strength, but losing the MacGuffin to his new grounded state. From here on, Droguza becomes the recurring villain, reappearing in almost every chapter, and each time he pops up, he's been given a new strength, far beyond that of his former self. Alongside his experimental body, he's also rocking an experimental mind, and despite working for Dill's World, still has a Deimos pride directly comparable to our own hero, even spouting that he wants to become the ultimate Deimos to restore his tribe to former glory. What Droguza doesn't understand is that he's been so mutilated by chemicals and experimentations that he's fighting for a cause that simply doesn't exist, and is likely the clustered, butchered thoughts of the many Deimos from which he consists. This lack of a concrete identity sees Droguza fronting hard and often overcompensating for his reduced sense of self. Deep down, he knows he's not a real Deimos and shouldn't even exist, which is why he's so loud and proud about becoming the best there ever was. Despite working for humans, Droguza's one to talk of Deimos supremacy, of which Dark is in complete ideological agreement. Upon discovering his delusional foe's nature, Dark, the mishmash hybrid of human and Deimos, discovers a unique connection with the ill-fated Droguza, and despite their antithetical short-term goals and constant clashing, feels a kinship. In Droguza's final moments, he confronts Darkham and attempts to take the power of the Spirit Stones for himself. Instead, he's turned into a monstrosity and is dispatched by Dark and company, with our troubled protagonist vowing to become the strongest Deimos in his name and lead them to victory in a war with the humans, the very same who use this broken experiment to fuel their own greed. With these two scenarios coming to a close and giving the party the ultimate bonded resolve in wiping the other out, this is where they finally face off, Karg representing a Deimos genocide and Dark representing a human one. Neither party can be seen as morally righteous, they're both taking the worst examples of their enemy and using that as justification to remove them wholesale. Deep down, they likely know this, but their hatred and lust for vengeance has clouded their ability to see past their own losses, amplified further by their aggressive posturing towards one another.
Wow, that's so relevant!
It all builds to this amazing, fantastical climax when they become friends and kill God. I don't know what you want me to say, it's a JRPG. Okay, it's not that bad. You pick which party to play as in the showdown, you know, rules of nature and all that. Then some side character rocks up and reveals that he's actually the Great One. Then he revives the Flying Fortress, which becomes the final dungeon for both parties. The origins of the humanoid devils are revealed. They were regular monsters who were mutated by the Dark One, the nebulous conceptual darkness that permeates the series. As humans had easily conquered monsters and they'd become more of a nuisance than a major threat, to produce the dark energy needed to return to full power, the Dark One created something, you know, akin to a human, but with the raw, primitive desires of a monster. Successfully manipulating two sides of a proud, blinded tribe to gain real power behind the scenes is like a modern epic. It goes to show that all you really gain from petty squabbles is the truly powerful becoming more so, and those at the bottom cop the brunt of the fallout. And here I was, thinking this game was written by an edgy 15-year-old for edgy 15-year-olds, when really it's a solid tale with many wholesome moral lessons about ideological blinders and polarization. Luckily for us, this is all completely fictional. Within the final dungeon itself, the parties become scattered and mixed, with a couple Deimos and humans on each side. They have little squabbles, but ultimately learn to control their seething racism for long enough to take down the final big bad. Once it's all said and done, they still hate each other and are given unique moments to flex that hatred, but they also help each other out as they're, you know, not really given any other choice. So, let's address the elephant in the room. Racism!
Let's heckin' unpack this big chunky, y'all. Give me your upvotes, cause you already agree with what I'm saying.
The underlying message about racism being bad is undercut by Deimos' propensity to act in biologically deterministic ways. After having played the game, I wouldn't say there are any good Deimos, they're all inherently violent or greedy and seem to act solely on survival at any cost. Humans can become demons and Deimos can have human moments, but they are the vast exception. For the most part, humans are caring and empathetic, they cooperate willingly even against their own wishes, while Deimos will see a weakened fellow with the same goals and opportunistically dispatch him. Even certain sub-races such as the Bee Warriors speak of eating their weakened comrades, outing themselves as Darwinistic cannibals, and you know, each to their own, it's not my place to judge. The natural state of the two tribes are fundamentally incompatible and cannot coexist with any form of genuine trust. The Deimos is violent and aggressive, where the human is passive and peaceful. Generally. We later learn that even the most destructive humans are working toward a meaningful goal and to create positive change for their fellow man, where Deimos violence is directed at anyone in their line of sight, less a collection of goals, more a blind lashing out. There are only 2 documented exceptions to this, with the protagonist's parents sharing a nut and the Slothian village, which is an isolated island where Deimos live peacefully with humans. Slothians are regular monster enemies from the previous titles, and I don't know if they count as Deimos or just intelligent monsters, but they are notably passive and only wish to dream and, be sloth-like. I wonder if they know that's a sin. It's hardly a good sample size for almost every other species, but it's a tough contrast to compare them to every other breed of Deimos and say they're worth anything, because they're barely alive. That's not even shit-talking the variety in Deimos, as the races, or whatever you'd call them, are quite varied and loosely based off the monsters found in the original Ark games. You've got the Drakir, who are flying warrior types and generally passive until they were radicalized by Draguza and are based off Drakes. The Orcon are the low IQ, hyper-aggressive impulse chasers based on orcs and goblins. There's the big blue fluffy wolves, likely evolved from Poundit, though outside of his family, we only ever see Volk. Camellia is also the only tree demon we see, based on the Mandragora looking things, and there are a few new types not based on old Ark monsters. The Bee Warriors, Frog Bitch, and the Happy Serpent Merchants also don't seem to have direct parallels, but with so many enemies it's tough to remember them all. I could be entirely wrong about that. Whether they're derivative of former works or not, they all derive from their own cultures and societies, and the way they interact and self-segregate is such a fascinating part of the world design. I don't know if it's disappointing that this is never expanded upon, or if it's fantastic that it's so downplayed that you really need to pay attention to appreciate it. While we don't see every locale of every species, we do see quite a few. The Korops live by an oasis, bees live in a giant hive, and the Drakir have made a home among the natural rock formations. Their intelligence discrepancies are self-evident, though most appear as enemies and blindly attack you, so it never really manifests as anything. These tribes aren't xenophobic for no reason, however. They're rooted in the environmental impacts of warring over and mass extracting a finite resource, the Spirit Stones. However, the game forgets this after 2 chapters and literally ends with the 2 protagonists agreeing that racism's cool and inevitable as long as living beings have differences, which, is kinda based. It's a mature, realistic take, like they know they'll never fully integrate or trust one another, they are unable to, but they're gonna shake hands and try to get on with it. That's life at a fundamental level. Discrimination happens in everything you do. At every turn, when you wake up in the morning, you discriminate against toast because you chose cereal today, but it doesn't mean the bread has to leave the pantry. It'd be stupidly optimistic to have everyone singing and holding hands around a campfire, passing the devil's lettuce amongst themselves and having mass interbreeding orgies. Like, meaningful change and social attitudes take a long time to shift, nothing happens overnight. Not to mention that a majority of the world would be wholly unaware of this civil pact. They didn't have the internet, they didn't have the worldwide communist gangster computer god with their Frankenstein radio controls, so a week later, a human's gonna call an Orcon a hairless monkey and end up dead. Even if it's true. After the Great One's defeated, the spirits leave the world, which makes spirit stones worthless, but that's where Deimos get their magic fuel from, so they've effectively become ugly humans. Humans also lose access to their advanced technology, so they're really just pretty monkeys, which makes Deimos mid-monkeys. Yeah, that makes sense. The whole racism is cool thing doesn't come out of nowhere either. Dark and Karg go through the Cave of Truths, or whatever the fuck it's called, together, and realize that even were they at harmony with one another, their ideals and way of life are simply incompatible. Holy shit, am I still talking about the story? I haven't even talked about what you do in this game. Twilight is a tactical turn-based JRPG, but not in the way you may think. It is unrestrained by whatever boxes you try to cram it in, as it's wholly circular. You control a character who maneuvers in a predefined radius and can interact with enemies, objects, and items within said space. Attacks have their own smaller red sections indicating the area of effect. If anything's within that crimson construct, it becomes a target, which can lead to some, minuscule positioning adjustments to fit in an attack that swipes 2 enemies instead of 1. It's not just a generic shape either, as the basic attack represents the arc of your weapon. For Gans and Maru, they have a thin attack area, with Maru's being longer due to his bow's range, and Gans's being about the length of an axe head. Volk has a fanned blade, which is wider at the tip, and his zone reflects the swiping space of his weapon. Dark and Karg have different kinds of swords, which means they have varying hit widths, Karg's being slightly longer and narrower, with Dark's being a little shorter and wider. There was clearly an effort to capture these ranges accurately, and it doesn't go unnoticed. They can also be modified with equipment, but it does still adhere quite closely to their original shapes. Each weapon and armor can have 3 upgrade materials slotted in, which range from straight stat increases to reshaping attack arcs, increasing elemental resistances, and Well, that's pretty much it, though it is a neat system, if a bit simple. Weapons are a far more significant part of the humans' combat arsenal, as everything they do is based around them. The story dictates that humans are incapable of casting magics and must use their technology, however rudimentary, to perform basic tasks such as elemental attacks and healing, to which combat adheres. Deimos, on the other hand, don't rely too much on their weapons, with even physically oriented fellas such as Volk having access to ice magic and no special attacks that feature his weapon. I know I keep harping on about the design duality, but it's easy to narratively create a divide and not have it reflected in gameplay, as it'd be too off-putting. Ultimately an unnecessary detail, but an addition that shows how desperate they were to build a consistent world in every aspect. Even if it makes no sense that Volk wouldn't have some sort of fancy blade tech or, using his claws and chompers, just don't think about it. This even comes down to Dark and Karg having a huge power divide in their weapon and magic techs, wherein Karg's weaponry is far more varied and developed than his magic, and vice versa for Dark. Abilities unlock with a second currency, with it also contributing to level tiers that allow further abilities to be unlocked. I dig this. Instead of lumping a bunch of shit on you and expecting you to make heads or tails of it, you take a manual approach to new abilities, with the stunted release giving you space and time to test them all out. Summon abilities also magically appear. The humans can summon their airship, and the Deimos can summon a Pyron, their version of an airship, and reference to Arc the Lad 3. These can be customized as well. You can feed the Pyron food, which evolves him in different ways, and the airship's machinery can be changed to influence how much power it uses and dishes out. It's not a huge feature, and more often than not, you forget it's there, but it is a unique subsystem. There's also team attacks, indicated by a strong glowing aura around a party member. They do big damage, and that's it. Experience and the secondary currency SP are paid out based on your actions, so there's no rocking up to battle and being given a free ride. It's trickier when you want to collect items and gold, as picking up anything off the ground ends your movement phase, and while you can attack after having pilfered the earth, you are rarely poised to do so. Drops aren't just handed out after combat either, you have to physically pick them up before the fight finishes or they're lost forever. If a boss drops a unique item, you'll have to juggle regular foes while you dispatch their leader to prevent its permanent loss. A color-coded system indicates what you'll receive, which makes it easier to bypass shit you don't want. White for items, yellow for gold, and blue for spirit stones, and it's nice that a small inclusion of a Mass Effect 3 ending removes the guesswork. Really, they could have made all dropped objects white so as to pop the hardest on the often muddy ground, but they were smarter than that. That's probably what I would have done. I'm not very smart. Alongside this is environmental factors in combat, such as tree stumps and barrels, which may contain items or gold, adding extra steps to obtaining loot. Outside of the surface level usage, there are certain battles which take these interactions a step further and actually do use them. During one scene, Dillsworld troops give chase to the human heroes and a bridge must be cut to sever their route, with the post being an attackable object. During another, 2 giant cannons must be hit with the airship to destroy them, as they do stupid amounts of damage and have a bullshit range. It's nice seeing these elements become an interactive part of the game, instead of relegated to a cutscene, even if they are highly contextual. While potentially annoying, you rarely remember things the game feeds and performs for you, but assembling a functional airship and using its lasers to destroy giant mounted cannons is definitely a noteworthy addition. While also functioning as a soft tutorial for how to engage summons in battle. They do, however, cost a lot of spirit stones, which is the fill-in for MP. Ghost rocks are a unique magic point substitute. They're a finite resource manually extracted from the earth. Each character has a maximum amount they can carry, and the only way to upgrade the capacity is with equipment. There's a collective party stash from which everyone can draw if they need a top-up, and this caps at 999. Stones can be freely moved between the stash or from character to character anytime outside of combat, so in addition to having 1,000 spirit stones in reserves, a more powerful character could borrow the stones of a secondary character for a slightly higher stock. They also become more expensive throughout the game, possibly alluding to a shortage based on rising conflicts with the Deimos or the mines drying up. This works twofold as a great way to signal the importance of the resource and that carelessly blasting away with magics will cost you. It's a large reason why I think the summon system was poorly designed, as it costs an arm and a leg to use and is a pain to restock constantly. Granted, it's so powerful that it should be heavily limited, but it's still an annoying task. Despite their usefulness, summons aren't really required anyway, as combat is rarely difficult. There are a few bosses that are reasonably tough, but overall, any given encounter is a breeze. Until you hit the arena, which are waves of fellas that you've got to manually heal between, and each arena's different, but often lasts between 20 and 30 rounds. These get bullshit tough out of nowhere, with some of the later enemies casting death spells that have way more accuracy than they should, but after powering through them, you're granted 2 secret characters. Our boy Deekbeck, and our girl Choco. They can't be used for story missions until the final dungeon, but they are a nice addition. I think the devs knew their game was a bit too easy and bordering on tedious if combat went on for too long, as dungeons from Arcs 2 and 3 return, wherein you enter an inconspicuously vacant room only to be ambushed by monsters. As far as I know, these aren't repeatable, are only fought once, and as an added bonus, you can flee from them. With the dungeons being small and encounters never taking too long, the pain inflicted by the former titles is wholly alleviated. You know, unless there's a lot of enemies, those fights can drag a bit. The largest offender of this is, in true Arc the Lad fashion, the final boss. This dude's got 3 phases, the first of which is heavily contextual. Your allies are set against a scattering of ostensibly random foes, but they're all illusory fiends, as attacking them will reveal their true form as a person of importance to the party. Each character hits their respective illusion 3 times and the fight ends. The second phase is straight up killing monsters before this spawning thing generates more and sucks up all Lilia's toes. It's very easy and did not have to exist. I get it, you liked Final Fantasy IX, so did everybody. The final phase is a doozy. Where do I even start? Okay, you've got this big black eye at the back wall of a fairly narrow arena with a protective barrier encasing his opticals. He spawns smaller eyes with a fairly decent health pool, but eliminating these recedes his barrier, allowing some actual damage to flow through. After a few rounds, the barrier reappears, along with a giant laser eye attack that scorches the center column of the battlefield, so when you're laying on the melee, you've got to be careful about positioning. The whole skirmish is extremely position focused, as if you're too close to the eye, he'll use an area of effect ability which drains the health of whoever's in range, healing himself. His cronies drop 27 spirit stones upon death, allowing for perpetual healing and ranged attacks if you can kill him fast enough and survive long enough. This effectively turns the fight into a delayed, funneled endeavour of resource acquisition and management. It's less a fight in the traditional sense and more of a puzzle where a certain level of precision and pre-planning is required. If you blast head first, you will die and be laughed at. While this fight has its issues, primarily being boring because it lasts way too long, you're forced to be hyper aware of your positioning, which isn't something that you've been asked of until this point. If the rest of the game had featured these elements, it would have been way less a cakewalk and much more of a fair challenge. Fundamentally, this fight boils down to beating the little dudes, powering up on spirit stones, rushing in for an attack, being punished for your greed, and hugging the walls so you don't get blown away. Might seem a little sloppy, and yeah it is, but it's a welcome attempt at spicing up combat. Where Darkham was just another guy and a lot of the bigger bosses were much easier, this requires active attention and careful input from the player. Overall, it's got to be the best final boss encounter in the Arc series, which, you know, isn't saying a lot, but good job. Characters' idle animations are reminiscent of the very first Arc title, wherein I mentioned they felt over-animated at times, but it also conveys a unique personality. The Orcon lean into their weird chimp punch and sway back and forth. These mage enemies' heads pulse with all the knowledge they acquired from reading a book a day, and there's many more examples. Most of these fellas are 3D realizations of the enemies found in the former titles, which is a nice touch. I don't think there's anything wrong with reinventing the wheel if you're paying tribute to it at the same time. Hey, remember how revolutionary the wheel was? You know, that's a kind gesture, and it's important to never take the wheel for granted. The player-controlled characters aren't as dynamic, but their animations while performing actions feature the same exaggerated flair the series is known for. But these accompany some questionable voice lines, and the animation itself is dated, but it's got that weird primitive charm you don't get in JRPGs anymore. It's evidently from a very specific time in the history of video games and 3D animation, one in which localizations were still incredibly cheesy. I have 2 other notes I couldn't find anywhere to slot without killing my pacing, and I mean, that's really saying something because my pacing isn't great, so here they are as bullet points. The world map is just a line connecting major points of interest, and there's a lot of dead space that's not used, but I dig that. It builds the world up as more of a world than a playground designed for our anime protagonists to frolic in. And finally, the music is fucking amazing. That's all. I want to close by saying Arc Twilight is a game before it's a narrative, but I'd be lying if I said the narrative didn't outshine every other part. The fact that me, a brainlet, could say so much using the plot as a vessel speaks volumes about the true depths of what's on offer, and no doubt there's significantly more to delve into, but who has the time? I'll see you in the next video where we put an end to all this darkness.
This is where I put an end to your ambitions.